Welcome to the Truth and Liberty Show, where trusted leaders bring biblical insights to important issues to help you stand for truth and effect godly change in our nation and in our world.
Hi, and welcome to Truth and Liberty. I'm Janet Porter, filling in for Richard Harris. So grateful to be here with you today. And as we look at all the issues that are going on, how to make sense of what's happening, we've got the borders, isn't it great, and tariffs and so many good things, but there's still some things that need some work. And I thought to myself, I was driving in the car and I said, all right, who do I most want to talk to? Whose opinion do I respect more than any other? And on the very, very short list is a guy that I always referred to as the smartest guy on the Hill, but it was more than just being very, very smart and bright, but it's a wisdom. It's a wisdom from God. I think an anointing from God is a guy that I am so grateful to call my friend. And I want to invite you back on the program, Congressman Louie Gohmert, who served for many years in Congress, who's also a felony judge and is now senior fellow of the David Horowitz Freedom Center. Welcome, Louie. So glad you're here.
Janet, always good to be with you, talk to you through any format. Thank you.
Praise the Lord. You know, I know that there are a lot of people that wonder, who are the good guys and who are the bad guys? And I remember coming to the Hill, just going to give you a little intro, because I remember coming to the Hill and we were lining up. We had 174 co-sponsors of the federal heartbeat bill. We were ready to bring it to a vote. And there were some that I thought were the heroes of the faith who flinched. So now I'm going to go with the pain-capable bill that protects 1% of the babies instead of protecting 9 out of 10. And you weren't one of those. You were one who stood there from the beginning, who was always there, ran to the battle. And I just want to say, you're tested. You're tested. You've been through the fire. You've come out gold. And I want to get your take on all the things that are happening, including the fact that we literally and figuratively dodged a bullet in this last election as the lawfare, the police state took over to raid President Trump's home, to take cell phones of people like Mike Lindell, who we're going to be talking to, and to sweep in and take all the records of what more than 100 members of Congress and other citizens to what was part of what they call Arctic frost. You were no doubt on the target. And, I've said to people, if it's like the Bible says, woe to you when all men speak well of you. When you're a target, when they say you as, when the left sees you as a threat, that means you're doing something right. But you were right there in the crosshairs of this lawfare, this police state takeover. And I want to find out what happened. And more importantly, what are we doing about it? So tell us, I've just read your article on Front Page Magazine, Arctic Frost Spying on Members of Congress. It's a good read for people who want to get the gist of what's been happening and what would have happened had we not won this last election, despite all of the assault against President Trump and those who stood with him. So fill us in, Louie. You were on the target. Let's just start there. They came after you. Tell us what happened.
Well, there were hundreds of targets on this list. And, the Fourth Amendment protects us from having searches and seizures without probable cause that a crime was committed and that this person probably was involved in the crime in some way. And that also assures us that we would have a chance to go do battle in court over whether or not there was sufficient probable cause. And as a former judge, and then for a time after that, Chief Justice of an Intermediate Court of Appeals, I've been involved in those battles. I was a former prosecutor. I'd been assigned to be a defense attorney before. And so I know all about these battles. I'd been in charge of grand juries, and so I know all about that. But what was really insidious about this, one of the many things, is Jack Smith, and I keep combining Arctic Frost, Jack Smith. It's a Jack Frost Smith, but he went before this grand jury, and keep in mind this was a D.C. grand jury where 95% voted for somebody besides Trump. And so they
At
probably,
least.
since they get to pick the grand jury, it's picked differently from just a random jury. They may well have had 100% of the grand jury that just absolutely hated Donald Trump and anybody that supported him. So I can see him. There were reams of paper because that's what Senator Grassley has found, reams and reams of paper with all these names and all these organizations, Republican organizations, and that included members of Congress, senators, and I can just see them going in there. It's so unscrupulous, so unethical, and basically saying, hey, we've got a lot of evidence we need to gather. We just need you to sign off on these so we can gather all this information. They didn't need probable cause. They didn't do that. And a decent federal judge would have recognized how problematic this was and say, no, you're going after members of Congress and all that. This is
On what
trouble.
grounds though,
You
Louis?
better
Were they?
get a
What was
warrant.
the
You better
supposed
get a warrant.
crime? This was all before January 6th and any supposed connection anyone might have had. What was
Yeah.
the grounds? Why were they saying you might not, confirm the election of 2020? That's
Well,
the gist of it?
at first, the first information they got was, well, there were a few senators that they got records, and they were just 3 or 4 days involved. But then when they got my records and some of the others, those were going for over 2 months. And then it looks like there was much more than that they were getting. So Tom Fitton's Judicial Watch, Sean Dunnigan's, we're going to court and we're going to get all the information that they were gathering so we can find out just the full breadth and scope of what they were doing. It was enormous what they did. But we know they did go before a federal judge because they got somebody to swear before the judge that you have to issue an NDO, a non-disclosure order that says you can't let these people know we're getting all their records because people like Gohmert, they'll flee the country. Except for my 4 years on active duty in the Army, I've only lived as an adult in Tyler, Texas. It's the only place I've owned a home. I'm not going anywhere. There's nowhere else to go. And
Were
and
they
and to
afraid you
say
might pull a
that
Hillary
about
Clinton and
me
destroy
and
the
all these
records?
oh yeah, that I would be to pull a Hillary Clinton and be destroying all these records and like the January 6th committee did, destroy all these records and then be threatening witnesses. There was no evidence whatsoever that anybody would do any of these things. And the judge signed off on it, which is another thing. This judge, he is not acting with good behavior. He needs to be removed from the bench because that's what Article 3, Section 1 says. You only get to stay on the bench if you're acting in good behavior. He is not. And so that's a whole nother topic. But anyway, that's what makes this so much more insidious, so evil, so much worse than Watergate or any other thing. Because if Donald Trump had not persisted, if he had not pushed all the way through all the lawfare, the assassination attempts, the debanking, a realtor, and they get him debanked by biggest banks in the world. They came after his family, his friends, his business associates. He kept pushing and persisting. If he had not won this election, we wouldn't be having this conversation. And it's clear that what Jack Smith was doing, they were following the old Stalinist mantra that, you show me the man and we'll find a crime to put against him. That's where they were going. That's what they were doing with Trump. And that's what I'm sure they would have done with any of us that were trying to stop their full takeover of the government. And besides, this was coming at a time when the Democratic Party was becoming a Marxist party. We saw it, we've seen it in New York City, and we saw, this is where Kamala was going. So this was going to be a Marxist takeover of our government and a complete elimination of the Republican Party. This was so big, the scope was so wide. And so we have got to get to the bottom of it. But we have got to punish the wrongdoers, and we have not done that. And I would submit that since Newt Gingrich's first term as Speaker, we have not had a Speaker willing to fight. We have not had a Speaker willing to stand up and say, we're taking back the power. We're going to punish people that are doing wrong. We're going to do what's right. Now, Mike Johnson is a good man and he's a strong Christian. He's a smart guy. I think he got overwhelmed in the first term while he was speaker, and I think he's getting his feet under him a little better. But we have got to have the chairs of judiciary do what they have not done in all the terms that I was in Congress, and that is hold these people accountable. Yeah, we did vote to hold Eric Holder in contempt, but Boehner would not let us do anything about it. So he still waltzed around Capitol Hill as if there was nothing to it. We had lots of hearings because these speakers wanted sound bites they could use politically, but they did not let us hold anybody accountable for actual criminal activity. So
Well, let me ask
it
you,
just
Louie.
got worse and worse.
Right now, and I don't mean to interrupt you. I think we've got a little sound
No,
delay
no, no,
happening,
no,
but
please.
Chairman Jim Jordan of the Judiciary Committee, and oh, how I wish you were still sitting on the Judiciary Committee. If you were, what would you say to Jack Frost Smith? What questions would you want to be addressed in this hearing that's going to happen, that's coming up?
Actually, I wouldn't be calling him as a witness at this point. That's not the way you make a case, and it bothers me that he's being called so soon. It bothers me that the FBI wants to question the seditious six because that's not the way you make a case. You do that if you're just wanting sound bites and to make a show. The way you make a case, Janet, you talk to the people around those that you're wanting to investigate as a target. You get all the things that these people said to them. You get all the evidence that they produced, the emails, all these other things. And once you gathered all of this other evidence, then you talk to them. Back in the 80s, I had friends that were FBI. In the 90s, as a judge here in Tyler, I had friends that were FBI and they were good. They were really good at their jobs. And I had one guy ask if I would help since I'd been involved in criminal work before to sit in with his client. And the FBI had him finally come in and they said, don't say a word. We want to show you what we got. And they laid out all this case that they were going to put him in prison. And it was a slam dunk case. What could he say? But yeah, you got me. So what can I do? That's the way you make a case. That's the way the FBI used to work. But the way Republicans have been doing is we'll just go straight to them, ask them some questions, put on a show, and then that once that person testifies before the committee, then all the people that he's talked to know, oh, okay, so that's the line I'm supposed to keep.
Mm.
That's not what he said to me, but that's supposed to be the line that we're going to stay with. So that's not how
It's
you
why
make a case.
it's why you interview witnesses separately, so they don't go along with each
Yes,
other's
yes.
stories. You find out
But
what's
but
really the truth.
you
Yeah?
got a principle, you hold them back. You don't go to them first. You go to all these other people, you get all the records, you get all that information, you hold them back, and then you talk to them when you've got all this evidence. And that way, when they're lying and you let them lie, and when they're not giving you correct accurate information. And then that gives you extra cases on top of it because they're lying to law enforcement. But they're not going about this in a way that I think is the best way to go.
Well, it was. to a point where I remember I don't know, I was speaking at some event and I said, listen, if the FBI hasn't raided your home and scarfed up your records and taken your phone away from you, I got to wonder if you're really a conservative. But you made a point in your article. It's not just going after civilians, and certainly the next candidate for president, but it's members of Congress. It's especially egregious because you're the only checks and balances we have left. If we've got an executive branch, you've got a judicial branch that are targeting people and going after them and swooping up whatever records to find whatever they can find. There is no checks and balances left. I mean, they'll say disagree with us and you'll be next, right?
Exactly. And I remember back in 0, '05 and '06 when William Jefferson from Louisiana, famous for having
Cold hard cash.
$90,000 in cold hard cash in his freezer. And I read all about that, and I knew uh, they had plenty of evidence for probable cause to get a warrant to search his home. And they had plenty of evidence to get a warrant to search his office. But up until that point, anytime there was a warrant to search a member of Congress or senator's office, you weren't allowed to just go in as a FBI or DOJ or prosecutor and grab everything because of this congressional privilege, because we have private constituent information. We have whistleblower information. We've got a lot of information that the executive branch is not allowed to have access to. And
These are
so,
whistleblowers type people too.
yeah, that among other information they're not entitled to have. And so, what they would have to do is come to the House counsel, the lawyers, and say, here we have a warrant. And they would go in and they would basically execute the warrant and they would grab all the information, all the files and all the computer information, and they would go through it all and they would figure out what is privileged and they would give that back to the member of Congress, and then they would give all that the warrant was seeking to the DOJ. That's the way it was done until Mueller did this in 2006. And he just went in the middle of the night and raided and took everything. And so I was part of the meeting between the lawyers of the White House, DOJ, House counsel, and the House counsel is going, how dare you? You have no right to do that. He said, well, we got a local judge to say we could do it because we're going to have lawyers within our DOJ. They'll go through everything and tell us what you can have back that's privileged. And no, that's not how it works. And so they went to court, and a local federal judge that was, just didn't know what he was doing, or maybe he did and was that unscrupulous, uh, had said, yeah, you can do it like that. Well, it was appealed to the DC Circuit, and the DC Circuit said, no, you can't, you've got to have a third party go through this. You can't do it at the DOJ. They appealed to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said, no, we're not touching that decision. The DC Circuit did just right. That's been the law. That's been the constitutional ramifications. That stuff is privileged. And some tried to say, oh, Congress thinks they're above the law. No, no, no. It's to protect those people, the whistleblowers, the constituents, private information. So that's the way it's been. But Mueller tried to go beyond what he was allowed. And here Jack Smith went much further than even Mueller did in violating those constitutional privilege. And what an intimidation factor. If you're an FBI agent and you contacted me or Jim Jordan, because we were talking about it back at the time, saying we got whistleblowers from the FBI talking to us, and you find out that the FBI, the DOJ just went and grabbed all our information secretly, and now they know who's calling in. Uh, wow, what a chilling effect on people that are just trying to be honest and report people that are breaking the law within the DOJ. It
You
means
know,
the DOJ will be above the law and they can do whatever they want. And it also means that if Donald Trump had not persisted, and God bless him, been so stubborn that he wouldn't give up and gone ahead and won this election, we would be a one-party country, and it would not be a good country. It would not be a land of the free anymore.
You know what I want to do right now? Just real quick. Let's just take a second and thank God. Father,
Thank
I
you.
just thank you for rescuing us. Thank you, Father, for prompting President Trump to turn his head at just the right moment to avoid
Mm.
that attempted assassination's bullet. I pray, Father, that now that you've given us another chance, I pray now that you would help us to use the chance that that we've been given. I pray, God, for the justice now to come. For all of the things that need, the wrongs that need to be righted, I pray, Father, now that you bring courage and that you bring a steadfast steel spine with those within our House of Representatives, those within the Trump administration, those who are willing to gather the information and to pursue these judges that have acted unconstitutionally and in this Marxist manner. And we just pray, help us now to use the chance you've given us in Jesus' name. Amen. One of the things that we look, and there's a lot of people sitting on the sidelines saying, where's the justice? And I want to say,
Right.
Congressman, you were one of the only people who went and visited the January 6th prisoners. That was so appalling what they did. And as you say, they've destroyed the records. They've done all these things. But where is the justice? I want to interject. I met a guy. He was known as the Lego Man. And they said, why do they call you the Lego Man? He says to me, I was at a film festival. He says, well, because when they raided my house, I'm a teacher in Michigan, and when they raided my house, he said that what they did is they found Legos. Robert Morse is his name, and he said that now the FBI came out and says he must be the mastermind because he had a Capitol building made of Legos in his home. And now they've said, oh, well, it wasn't really put together. It was in the box still, but we think he was one of the masterminds, and he was in jail for 4 years because he had Lego sets, and he went to a January 6th rally for President Trump. What's being done there? First off, thank you for standing with those American patriots who were political prisoners. Tell us the next step, though. What can we do there, Congressman? Something's got to be done to bring justice to this.
Well, exactly, and it hasn't been done, and if these people are not punished that just abused our justice system, you know, uh, as Romans 13:4 says, if you do evil, be afraid, because God does not hand the sword to the government in vain. But if you have a government that has the sword and refuses to punish evildoers, then that government's not going to last. And it's going to fall and be toppled by injustice and by evildoers. And that's what we're facing. And we have got to have people with the courage of their convictions and the courage of their jobs, because really what we've seen for 30 years is people that are following the Sam Rayburn to go along, to get along, go along. Just it's easier, just Louis, just go along. And one of the most frustrating things to me as a Christian were wonderful, good Christians in Congress that would say, Louis, you don't have to worry, God's in control. And it would be so frustrating. Yeah, but he expects us to use the positions we're in to bring about justice and right. And so he expects us to use those positions. But anyway, Tommy Nelson is a preacher. He just retired in Denton, Texas. And he had a line. He said, just because God's in control doesn't mean he wants us to lean on our shovel and pray for a hole. And
I
that
got to
is a
dig.
good, yeah, and it's so true. He gave every one of us some tools to use, and he expects us to use them. And in Congress, Republicans have not used our tools. And if people are not brought to justice, and I gotta say, I like Pam Bondi. Uh, Chad Mizell, I'm glad he's gone as deputy, but he was helping Rod Rosenstein when he was the deputy, and he was working against Trump, I believe, my personal opinion. But we have got to have people that are more active in going after folks. You can't wait to go after Comey until right at the end of the statute of limitations. And they haven't been going after as actively as I would have hoped the people that have been doing wrong. And if we miss this window that Donald Trump and God has given us by this reprieve, then it will have been a maybe 2, maybe 4 year reprieve. And then we're going to go back to being brutalized, our records taken, and we're going to be a one party country. And, you mentioned I'm a senior fellow with the David Horowitz Freedom Center. And, David was a leading communist in the 60s, early 70s, before he realized how horrible communism was. And he became a leading defender of America and our freedom. But what David was telling us was that their motto as leaders of the Communist Party was their motto among the leaders: the worse, the better. The more chaos you could create, the closer they were to getting to the point where they could take over as Marxists. And so they're loving the chaos they create with all of these
Yeah.
terrible things. And when Republicans don't do something about it to put it back in order, then it just gets worse and worse. And we're closer to the day when they take over. And we
And
can't
the
let that happen. And David left a great legacy. He did a book, called The Professors, where he named, names, hundreds of names of professors that were communists, that went into universities when they quit rioting and blowing up buildings, and went, oh, we'll go teach teachers to teach future teachers about Marxism being great. Well,
and Christians
then
sent
we
their kids
bring
to school to be indoctrinated
yeah,
by
and they
this
learn that
nonsense.
socialism is great. And I've
And
had
at the
young people
core,
say, it sounds like a Christian thing, this socialism, Marxism, everybody's sharing, from those according to their ability to those according to their need. I'm going, no, but you have to have a totalitarian government that takes everybody's freedom away, no more freedom, and then you have this elite group, tiny elite group at the top, and then everybody has equal shared misery. That's what it is. I was an exchange student in the Soviet Union. I saw it firsthand. I don't want to go there, but
we're coming up
we
on a
have an
break. I
opportunity.
I don't want to go there either. And I'll tell you, at the core of Marxism is atheism. That's what it is. And the difference
Yeah,
between
that's what
socialism and
Dostoevsky
communism
said.
is what we see in New York. They, instead of being having a gun to their head, they cast a vote. One is suicide, and one is murder, and that's where we are right now. God saved us from this Marxist regime. We're going to talk about how to use the chance we've been given, but let's take a break. We'll be right back with Truth and Liberty when we return.
Darkness has attacked our nation, but God is raising a standard. Now is the time to wake up and shine the light across America and around the world. Believers are fighting back, eyes are opening, hearts are changing, and Christ is being proclaimed. In government, education, family, media, and the church, we are mobilizing to engage culture with truth. Go to truthandliberty.net. America needs Christians of steadfast faith to stand up and boldly proclaim the promises of God. Faith for America by Richard Harris shows how the prayers and steadfast faith of ordinary believers can carry a nation through its darkest hours. Now is the time to stand firm, pray boldly, and keep fighting for freedom, trusting God to bring light from tragedy. Order your copy today.
Hi, welcome back to Truth and Liberty. I'm Janet Porter, filling in for Richard Harris. So grateful to be with you and with our special guest. Former Congressman Louie Gohmert, he's a former judge, former prosecutor, former chief justice of an appellate court. This guy's done it all, and there's a reason. God has gifted him with wisdom, and that's why I had him on today to talk about what's going on. He's been a target, he's been in the crosshairs of the lawfare, and now he's gathering evidence to do something about it. It's fantastic, and it's great to know Tom Fitton and Judicial Watch and you at the David Horowitz Freedom Center are gathering information to make sure the judges are accountable, that they're not just an arm of the police state. But we've got people like Tina Peters still in jail in Colorado. I mean, I saw the Truth Social that came out from the president saying free Tina Peters. I wish that he could pardon her, but because it's a state court, not federal, she's still held there. Her mother's in her 90s. She's just unable to see her family. It's really appalling to see a political prisoner still behind bars, even in this administration. Any take you would say what we could do there?
Well, I just can't help but wonder if there is not room for a federal investigation. We, it, I've understood that there is solid evidence out there that there's foreign ownership of some of these, at least one of the machines, voting machine
Voting machines.
company. Yeah, and that's not appropriate. That needs to be investigated, and some of the things that Tina Peters was looking into need to be investigated. And if people were coming after her to try to cover that up, then there could be federal crimes involved. So I would think that that should be looked into and investigated. And there is, I would think, reason for, the federal government to look into that and investigate that. So, yes, she was convicted in state court, but if that was all manipulated in order to shut her up and to silence the evidence that she had, then that is a bigger, sinister issue than uh, then, then, well, it's an issue that needs to be investigated by the federal government, put it that way.
Yeah. I just watched Mike Lindell's a documentary, Absolute Proof. We're going to have a conversation with him shortly about
Yeah.
they have proof of the interference that took place with the machines from foreign interference, particularly centered in the Chinese Communist government. And yeah, I guess this leads to my next question, Louis, that really is on my heart heavy is what have we done about this? You got the machines, you got the mail-in ballots, you've got all of these entrance ways to really steal elections. Dead people are voting. It's illegal aliens are coming in and voting, and they're allowing it in Michigan and elsewhere. What do we need to do? I mean, we've got the midterms coming up. Where are we in that? I'm concerned, and I don't know that we've addressed the crisis that led us here. Do you?
Well, I wish I could say that there's no reason for your concern, but there is uh, tremendous reason for your concern. Uh, President Trump's slogan, "We got to make this too big to rig," that helped him get through and win the election, even though the elections had not been cleaned up. The elections in Texas had not been cleaned up, and that was a big reason I ran for attorney general. The AG's office could have used their civil powers, to get injunctions, and they didn't do that. And we had there was evidence that people had brought forth in areas around
Truckloads full
Dallas,
of ballots,
Houston.
suitcases
Yeah,
under tables. It was crazy.
yeah, those in Georgia and Arizona and Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and Michigan. Uh, we're finding out, and some of those now have been proven that there were improprieties, and after the fact, 4 years after the fact doesn't help you a lot for the election 4 years before.
But
But
where is
yet
the
you go
justice
online, yeah,
and the
you still,
correction? We've got to get this thing fixed.
and we before the midterms next year,
Yes.
because if
Yeah.
we don't, then it's not going to be too big to rig. The rigging will allow them to retake the House, and then President Trump will be looking at 2 years of being impeached every 6 months. So that will be the end of his ability to do anything. So
Mm.
it is really critical that the DOJ quit sitting on its hands and get after these issues. And I don't see that they're being pursued properly.
I think that's a prayer point, but it's an action step that needs to be taken. And any influence you
Gotcha.
have, I know you'll use it because I don't know that there's anything more important. Because if we don't have free and fair elections, we don't have a country left, and
That's right.
that's where we were on the brink of just this last go around.
Oh,
I
so
want
I
to get to
wish I
something
could tell
else.
you there's no reason for your concern, but there's great reason for your concern.
God help us. God help us. Another thing that
Well,
is very
he's allowing us to help ourselves, and we have
yes.
not been helping ourselves.
Yes. So that's needs to be handled at the Department of Justice. It needs to be Trump. The J6 thing needs to happen within Congress, right? You're working on the judges, but it's still Congress that's got to bring them to
Got to be
task.
the judiciary committees that actually do something.
Yeah.
And so far, my 18 years that when we were in the majority, nobody really wanted to subpoena a judge and bring them in and question them about bad behavior.
Mm.
Needs to be done.
I remember when Tom DeLay talked about restraining the judges and taking away some of their authority to rule. That was when the Supreme Court, for the first time, wanted to come over and have lunch with them. And when it was, I think it was Antonin Scalia, I believe one of the heroes of the court, says, "What can we do to get along?" And he took out a pocket copy of his Constitution. He says, "Well, you could start by reading this." That'd be a great place to start. But let's look back at some of the places where the battle's the hottest, and I believe that it's very core to us to be on. When we talk about where you are in history, you want to be on God's side. God's side is the right side of history, and that is also not just being pro-freedom and pro-America, but it's also pro-Israel. And it's concerning to see. I saw the interview that you saw with Tucker Carlson and Senator Ted Cruz. He was trying to. I was going to play it, and I'm like, I'm not going to play it. Basically, he was saying, Ted Cruz was saying that, I learned in Sunday school that God is Israel. You bless Israel, and God will bless you. If you curse Israel, you'll be cursed. And Tucker Carlson, in his snarky way, well, you mean the government of Israel? He says, I mean the nation of Israel. That's what the Bible says. And he said, what's the population of Israel? You don't know? Trying to put him on the spot because he doesn't have the number of people who reside in Israel off the top of his head. I mean, it's really it made me start praying for Tucker more. I liked everything he's done in the past. I don't like this. And then you see Candace Owens on the anti-Semitic bandwagon. She's now saying that Israel was the one behind the murder of Charlie Kirk. And what else can we blame them for? Maybe the attack of October 7th. Well, they've already done that. They blamed Israel for the attack of October 7th. We saw it on college campuses across America. That's why we rented airplanes and flew banners that were pro-Israel, Jewish Lives Matter across America. But it's concerning to the point where Tucker Carlson now says this. This is what he said. What is I'm going to ask you the test, Congressman. What is the single biggest threat to Christianity? Is it A, Islamic terrorists that have slaughtered hundreds of thousands of Christians in Nigeria? Or is it Christians that support Israel? Let's just think about what's a greater threat to Christianity. No, no, no. It's actually, Tucker says that it's Christian Zionists, people like Corrie ten Boom, who hid Jewish people took refuge in her home before the Nazis threw her and her family in the concentration camp. He thinks that the Nazis were the good guys in that scenario, and Corrie ten Boom, the Christian Zionist, is the bad guy. I mean, to the point where he's praising a historian that thinks that the chief villain of World War II was not Adolf Hitler. It was Winston Churchill, the man that saved Western civilization. He's the bad guy in that war.
Yeah,
Wow,
there's a
it's
lot.
that bad. I want to get your take on it because I don't understand it.
Well, I majored in history and I've never stopped studying history. And I get very frustrated by people that tried to rewrite Second World War history and continuing since then. But there's no question in my mind that the greatest evil in World War II came from Adolf Hitler and those immediately following behind him. It was such an evil. And if Churchill had not stood up to him, basically he saved the West, Western civilization. Roosevelt was tentative, and really Churchill was expected to cave to Hitler. Fortunately, he didn't.
Never, never, never
And
give up.
and he was not a perfect man by any stretch of the imagination, but he did not cave. Western civilization was saved, thank God. And back in those days, Roosevelt goes on public radio on D-Day and has a prayer for 6-8 minutes where he's it was not a politically acceptable prayer today, because he was praying that God would help our troops and help them kill the bad guys. It's quite a prayer for anybody that cares to read it or hear it. But we back then we understood what evil was, and that we were on the side of right in that. Uh, and Israel is our best friend in the Middle East. It's
The only democracy.
the Yeah, and we could not afford to have an outpost, an American outpost, to protect us in the Middle East, uh, that is as good for us as Israel is in the middle of what all they're in the middle of. It's just so dangerous where they are and how they're surrounded. And I'm grateful they're our ally. I'm grateful they're our friend. And in that interview with with Ted, and Tucker's been a friend for years, and I was so glad to see him at the inauguration. Got a big hug because I really liked the guy. I've liked him ever since his earliest days at Fox when we met. But but anyway, and Tucker's right. God was telling Abraham that it was those that bless you and will be blessed, and it was his seed that would be blessed. But that land was given to the children of Israel. That was the promised land. And as you go to Israel and you visit what's now called the occupied West Bank, and you visit where Hebron, where David ruled over Israel for 7.5 years, and they're saying, well, Israel has no prior right to that. That was Israeli land long before it was ever, Palestinian land at all. And David's father is buried there. They have a tomb where they're pretty certain was David's father's tomb there. And you've got the cave of the saints where they're buried. Abraham bought that land so nobody could ever say it was not his, so it's hard to say that that's not Israeli land. And so I also worry when I hear people say we need to divide that up, because I know in the book of Joel, the 3rd chapter, where God is saying why he's going to bring down judgment on countries. A big reason he's going to bring down judgment on certain countries is because they divided the land that he gave to Israel. So since my oath is to the United States and wanting to help the United States, I don't want to see judgment brought down on the United States. Those are my feelings.
And
But I
and that's what
also
concerns
know,
me. when we don't know all the details of the peace deal, and is there division
Yeah.
involved? That's a very, very dangerous thing, because what it says in Genesis 17:7 is that covenant said, I will establish my covenant between me and you. This is between God and Israel and your offspring after you throughout their generations, for an everlasting covenant. Everlasting, that's a pretty long time. And just as the Bible is a roadmap to Christ, all of the things in the Old and the New Testament all point to Jesus. There's a center. There's a center focus as well as the people of Israel. From Genesis to Revelation, it's Israel. It's the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And I'll tell you,
Well, let's face
we're in
it
we're
though,
in some
God
pretty.
got mad at the children of Israel,
He
and
did.
so much so that he eventually allowed, the northern kingdom to be taken over by Assyria, and and he let them have a warning, and they didn't heed the warning, so he let Assyria come in. The southern kingdom, he let them have a warning, and they didn't heed the warning, so he let Babylon come in and take them. But even so, the prophets would say, but someday he's going to allow the return of all the people from all the countries to which he scattered his chosen people. He's going to
Yeah.
allow them to come back. Well, that has happened. But what I know historically speaking, yes, I'm a Christian, but put all of that aside, what I know historically speaking is when people start going after and being accusatory toward Jews, toward the children of Israel, toward the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, then we're on a slope that's going to be bad for all of humanity.
Yeah.
It's going to lead to the most perverse and worst evil. That's where it gets started and it goes to evil. That's a starting place. And that kind of anti-Semitism never leads to good. And so it bothers me greatly to see it get started here in America like I never thought it would.
Well, we need to call it out when we see it, even if it's from people who we consider to be friends. I think that's very, very important. Want to switch gears for a minute, because I need your strategy. I miss coming into your office and sitting across the table saying, "What do we do now, Louie?" Where we are right now is there's a lot of good things. God rescued America. There's justice that needs to happen. There's a lot of things that need yet to happen. The voting system needs to be on our front page of our prayer list and the action steps that we take. But
Yeah.
but I'm concerned about life. It seems as though pro-lifers have been relegated to the shadows. That, well, you know what? Just, it's viewed as a liability. We forget that Kamala Harris spent $1.5 billion running on abortion, but she lost on abortion. People seem to forget that. We have Roe versus Wade that is now in the ash heap of history. There's nothing standing in the way of us protecting children except the false notion that, well, it's a state's issue. Better not touch it. It's a state's issue. We heard that same kind of argument in the issue of slavery. Yeah, we'll just have some slave states and some free states. That didn't work so well, because we have a constitutional God-given right to liberty. We have a constitutional God-given right to life. So there should not be some life states and some death states. They should all have to go along with what our Constitution, what God has given us, and what our Constitution guarantees. In the 14th Amendment, we have equal protection under the law. And one of the things I found, Louis, and I know you know this because you're an expert in all this, but it was new to me. I was just reading the Constitution one day, and in the 14th Amendment, that equal protection thing, it says that Congress shall have the power to enforce by appropriate legislation the provisions of this article. In other words, when those members of Congress swore an oath to uphold the Constitution, that's part of what they were supposed to do. You're supposed to have appropriate legislation to enforce equal protection, that nor shall any state deprive any person of life. This is not being done because of this misunderstanding. It's a state's issue. How do we get around that? Because, I started a postcard campaign. You can send your postcards to Congress to remind them of that, to point out their jobs, to keep their oaths. But what advice do you have for us? We need your strategy, Congressman.
Well, let me just say, when the pain capable bill, that said basically when a child is capable of feeling pain, then at that point forward, you can't have an abortion. Uh, that is such a gray area because it's hard to determine the exact point that a child feels pain. So when you came forward with the idea of the heartbeat bill, I just thought that was absolutely brilliant because, when somebody's on the ground, what do? You check to see if they have a heartbeat. If they have
Mhm.
a heartbeat, they're alive. If they don't have a heartbeat, they're not alive. And I thought that was so brilliant. And so also allowing mothers to hear the heartbeat, of the child within them, that is so immensely helpful. So I thought that was a brilliant um, piece of legislation, and that came from you, Janet. So
Came from God.
God
I
bless
just I
you
just
for the
took the beating
inspiration
for
to
it.
do that. Yeah, so God bless you for that. Um, but it
But before
does
you answer, I
seem
want to
like,
interject something. I just had this flashback of being in the hearing room in the Judiciary Subcommittee, and you were sitting there, and we played the ultrasound of then baby Lincoln, an 18-week-old unborn baby. And I remember as the room, everybody was, there was disruption and people who were protesting. But when that baby's heartbeat was seen and heard in that committee, the room was silent. And I looked over at you, and you gave me a thumbs up, and it was like one of the highlights of this whole battle. Is Louie thought that was a good idea, and I remember also that at that moment when that happened, one of the people who was there protesting, one who's just been disruptive moments before, was seen wiping tears from her eyes. So if this baby's heartbeat can reach even the hardest of hearts, I knew it could reach America. And I know this is something God can use to protect not just the babies in the red states, but across America in the blue and the purple states, across from sea to shining sea. So what do we do, Congressman? What's
well,
your advice?
uh, you're right. It has taken a back seat, and people have said it's a losing issue. You got to run away from it. But I don't think it is, and I think it's the right thing to do. So we just got to keep pushing, keep pushing. It's uh, the most innocent among us, and it's the right thing to do.
What do you
So,
say to the congressmen that I've run into them? They say it's a states issue. The states will take care of that. What do you say to those folks?
well, in the meantime, what are you doing in your state to address that? That's what you say to them. If it's a state issue, what are you doing to help your state address that issue then? Um, because they're likely not doing anything at all. Um,
Yeah.
so I think, that basically that's what the Supreme Court said. Okay, it's a state issue. So, well, okay, what are you doing in your state? Because what they're doing is that seems to be an excuse. Okay, we don't have to do anything more about it at all. Um,
Yeah, but the bottom line is, Congressman, that it's not, it's more than a state issue, because the right to life is not given to us by the government. It's given to us by God. Something that
yeah,
Ben Carson reiterated at Charlie Kirk's memorial service, that this is an inalienable right, one that cannot be legislated away. And that the role and that what the Constitution guarantees, that we have equal protection, that states shall not, nor shall any state
supposed
deprive
to,
any person of life. That's all in the Constitution that members of
supposed
Congress swore to uphold. And you know what? It says in Section 5 of that 14th Amendment that Congress shall have the power to enforce by appropriate legislation in Congress, appropriate
yeah,
legislation, things like the heartbeat bill, to actually enforce this God-given inalienable constitutional right, right?
yeah, you're so good, Janet. You're exactly right. Yeah.
Well, I just miss you down there, because we need to bring that common sense thing. Just a reminder of the oath you took and what it says. That you have the right to do this. Yeah,
Yeah.
states can protect children, but so can Congress. That's the key. So we talked about the midterms, where we're going with that, and by the way, that we've got members of Congress telling the members of the military not to listen to their commanding officers if it's unlawful. That seems a little worrisome. If you've got a whole bunch of people telling them don't obey, don't obey if you think it's unlawful, that's quite troubling. What say you
Well,
on that front?
that's creating chaos, and that's what Marxists want to do. add to the chaos that brings you closer to the takeover. But, from somebody that was in the military and quite familiar with the UCMJ, and especially 2.5 of my 4 years was under a commander in chief named Jimmy Cotta, Jimmy Cotta. And we felt like he was doing so much damage to our military, and morale was going down, and people were so frustrated. And it was after Vietnam, and people didn't like us very much. But we were routinely reminded that if you say or do anything to indicate derogative feelings toward the commander in chief, it is a crime under the UCMJ, and you will be prosecuted. And we got into current day, well, like under President Trump's first term, where you even had people like General Milley that he violated that UCMJ, that criminal law, and had no consequences whatsoever. And so then you've got these people, and they're encouraging people, and they're doing it where they're trying to say, well, we were just being obscure. You don't have to follow an illegal law. But they have, in their other statements, have made clear what they believe the illegal laws are. So I don't think it would be that difficult to put together a case saying, in your other statements, you say these laws are not lawful. So when you're telling them in your little commercial that you don't have to follow the illegal laws, they already know what you believe are unlawful laws. And as a judge, um, both under federal law and under state law in Texas, we don't recognize accomplices. Accomplices are considered to be principals. And so you give instructions to the jury that somebody that aids or abets in the commission of a crime is also a principal. And aiding and abetting, the definition includes the word encourage. If you encourage someone to commit a crime. And I'm telling you, Janet, those commercials sure kind of sound like they're encouraging somebody to commit a crime.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. We've
they're
got just about a minute left, and there's 100 things I want to ask you. You know what's going on
okay.
with New York, and Gavin Newsom now is trying to tax people that move to your fair state, that evacuate the state of California. I get your take on all this, but we have really just a minute left, and I want to, whatever it is that's most on your heart, pressing on your heart, I want to hear what's on your heart, Congressman. With a minute left, I want to hear from you.
Well, it's about the Christians who are not standing up for what they believe and not praying and taking action, because God gave you the ability to do something. He gave all of us the instruments of some kind to do something, and you sitting back is just like the guy that was given a talent, and the master came back and said, "What'd you do with it?" And he said, "Well, I buried it with, and so here it is back." No, he expected you to do something with it. And that is what is so frustrating to me. We're going to lose this gift of a republic that the founders paid with the last full measure, most of them, of devotion. Most of the signers of the Declaration, they paid with everything they had, with their families, and we're going to lose it unless they
Amen.
start
Unless we
using what
act.
God has given them.
And we're out of time, but I'm so grateful. Thanks so much, Congressman. God bless you. We'll see you
Thank you,
next time
Janet.
on Truth
Love
and
being
Liberty.
with you.